Oh. Satchidanandarupaya Vishvotpatyaadihetave Tapatraya Vinashaya Shri Krishnaya Vayam Numaha Janmadhyasya yatonvayaditaratascharteshvabhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye Muhyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Dharma Projita Ketavotra Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam Vastavamatra Vastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim Va Parerishvaraha Sadyo Hridya Varudyate Trakritibihi Shushrushubistatchana. Hariyom and greetings from Niagara Falls. The original Ramayana is 24,000 shlokas. And all of these verses are teaching a singular message, and that is to be humble, humility. And evidence of this is Bhagavan Rama. When he embodied himself, he did this following Manava Dharma. He acted in a way that we should act. And Bhagavan Rama was most humble. I had recently shared with all of you that when his father died, when Jatayu died, when Devi Sita was kidnapped and so on, in all of those experiences, he felt the same sadness. Not more for his father, not less for Jatayu. He had the humility that all are important. Srimad Bhagavata, the original one is 4 verses. The elaborated one is 18,000 verses. That's what we're flowing through right now. Has the singular message of surrender. Humility finds fulfillment in surrender. And evidence of this, when we study the word Bhagavata, the last syllable is ta. Ta means tarini. Tarini means to cross. It is to surrender oneself to feel that you are divine. To nurture humility, to practice surrender, this requires one to be active. This can't be intellectual. This can't be passive. This has to be active. And I was sharing with our seekers here, we have been investing in this for more than 6 years. My very first Vedanta and Ramayana class was while I was in the Canadian Rockies teaching out of an RV, if you remember that. That was 2016. And if you calculate that out, that's more than 200 hours that we have been investing in bhakti. What's quite special about this, I was just sharing with the Cleveland community about what a diya is, that a diya symbolizes the body, mind, ego, knowledge. What we've been doing for 6 years, 200 hours, this is our own personal Vijayadashami. We're fighting our own inner enemies. This is our own personal Deepavali. That we're feeling that Bhagwan is more glorious than we are. In the 11th skanda, that is section 11, this teaching is known as mukti. Mukti means freedom. And the reason why this is because Bhagwan Krishna is leaving. He is leaving his particular form and name. And this is called mukti, that we should also practice the same. When he leaves, Kali begins. And I've shared many times with all of us, the best way to live in Kali Yuga is to get out. Because it's just going to become more sad. Bhagwan is leaving, we should leave too. In chapter 1, the main message is our only relationship in life is with Bhagwan. Who knew that? The Devis knew that. Who knew that? The Gopis knew that. And that's why Bhagwan, he foreshadows that my entire family, generation after generation, they're going to engage in self-destruction. So one's only relationship, the only one we can depend on, is Bhagwan. In chapters 2 through 5, we have Upadesha from the yogis. Guidance from those who are happy. And what is that Upadesha? Start to offer what you do to Bhagwan. So if you reflect on all of the verbs you engage in, like speaking, sleeping, talking, eating, offer what you do to Bhagwan. And when you're trained in that, that will help you to offer yourself to Bhagwan. First, what you do, and then the doer is to be offered. That is how one becomes happier. In chapter 6, we are reintroduced to Rishi Uddhava. Now, I told all of you that Rishi Uddhava is what of Bhagwan Krishna? Anyone who here knows, you can tell me or you can share in the chat. He is Bhagwan Krishna's friend, minister, Utsava Murti. Very good. As many of you are sharing, he is Bhagwan Krishna's Utsava Murti. That Bhagwan is going back, but Bhagwan's presence can be felt through Rishi Uddhava. And I was reflecting a lot on the importance of a Utsava Murti, like the Utsava Murtis we have here at Chinmaya Dhara. Srimad Bhagavatam is an Utsava Murti. When you reflect on Rishi Uddhava, how are you actually feeling him? You're doing that through Srimad Bhagavatam, correct? And for us specifically, we are not so strong in terms of Sanskrit or strong in terms of the Katha. Really, Vedanta and Bhagavata is an Utsava Murti, correct? How is Bhagwan's presence being felt? Through this course. And I really, really, really would like for you to reflect on that, because if you do, that will connect you back to Bhagwan Krishna. In chapter 7, Rishi Uddhava is asking Bhagwan Krishna to teach him, guide him to be like Bhagwan. And Bhagwan Krishna shares, Buddhi Upashrita. Buddhi Upashrita. I'm going to say it a little bit louder. Buddhi Upashrita. Buddhi means intellect. Upashrita means to depend. That if you want to be like Bhagwan Krishna, you should depend on your own intellect. And what's so incredible about this, you know, the imagery is not here right now, but typically if you have the bluish books of Bhagavad Gita, you have two personalities. You have Prince Arjuna and Bhagwan Krishna. Prince Arjuna is the mind, and Bhagwan Krishna is the intellect. So Bhagavan tells Rishi Uddhava, you should depend on your own intellect. And when you do, everything you need to know, you will know. Now, Rishi Uddhava, remember, he got trained by the gopis. So he wants a simpler message. He doesn't want this simpler message for him. He wants a simpler message for the people. He's already prepared. He's an ideal student, but he knows the people are not prepared. They are not ideal students. So he asks for simplicity. And in the same chapter then, Bhagavan Krishna gives precedent. He shares the details of someone who depended on their intellect, and that is Rishi Dattatreya. Rishi Dattatreya is one who depended on his own intellect. He felt his intellect was divine. Bhagavan Krishna shares with Rishi Uddhava, only one who is detached can teach detachment. The one who's detached is practicing this, so all they share will be practical. So if you want to learn, you have to practice detachment. And once you start to practice detachment, you will learn lots. Rishi Dattatreya is an icon of that. How is Rishi Dattatreya, how does this katha begin? You have Raja Yadu. Key point being is he's a king. And he's in the jungle. And he sees Rishi Dattatreya, who is this young boy with nothing. But Raja Yadu feels that this boy has everything. Everything outside, everything inside. So he asks him, how did you become so brilliant outside and inside? And Rishi Dattatreya starts to speak like a avadhuta. Have you all heard of this word before? Avadhuta. The word dhuta means to shake. Avadhuta means completely shaken. The implication being is that Rishi Dattatreya has completely shaken off limits. What society thinks about him, how his body looks, and so on. So completely shaken off. And he shares with Raja Yadu how he can be as brilliant. Now, for all of us in a most practical way, the messaging that Rishi Dattatreya shares is 24 teachers or lessons, and I'm going to share this in a virtuous way, 24 virtues that we can practice to be less dependent externally and to depend on ourselves more. The first teacher that Rishi Dattatreya highlights, whom he learned from. Who was it? Yes, Bhagavan Krishna, but more specifically, tell me in the chat. Earth, that's right. Rishi Dattatreya's first teacher is the earth. Generally, what he learned from the earth is to forgive. Generally, it is to forgive. Now, we've heard this message before, you should forgive and forget, and so on. Trying to offer more practicality to this. When I was engaged in commercial real estate and so on, then I just finished university and I was working, and I saw so much disintegration in business. People who were selfish, people who cheated and so on. And this was agitating to me. And I was asking my father that you've been doing this, you've been exposed to this for decades. What do you do when people around you are not following the rules? And he shared, it is not your job to teach principles. It is not Vivek's job to teach principles. And that helped me to be very accepting, even forgiving of the wrongdoings I saw in society. So for all of us, We all feel we're teachers, correct? We love giving advice. But if you take this message of it's not our job to teach principles, we become forgiving like the earth. And specifically, what can we learn from the earth? To serve. Rishi Dattatreya focuses on the mountains and the trees, that they're always serving, that we should serve also. And I was sharing with all of our seekers here, practically, how does one become more seva-oriented? The more aware you are of your privilege, the more you will share it. So if you find that you're not a sharing person, I'd like to deduct that you're not a awaring person, as in you don't know how privileged you are. When people ask me, why do you teach Bhagavatam? Why do you teach Vedanta? Because not everyone has the privilege to go and live in an ashram with a master. Now it's becoming even harder. I was almost grandfathered in to doing so. So that's why I know my privilege. Every moment I know my privilege. So I'm trying to share that. And you're receiving it, yes? All of you are like trees right now, just unmoving. Earth. Bhagavan Krishna shares Rishi Dattatreya's next teacher is the air. From earth to air. He shares. And I'm going to read 2 verses, okay? Here's your first verse. The next verse will be about fire. This is in the 11th skanda, the 7th chapter, the 40th verse. 11:7:40. Vishayeshvashvashvishan yogi nana dharmeshu sarvataha gunadosha vyapetatma na vishajjeta vayuvat. He shares, for a yogi, sense objects enter the sense organs. Nana dharmeshu sarvataha, and all of the qualities of those sense objects going into the sense organs, guna, dosha, vyapetatma, all of the strengths and weaknesses of those objects do not touch that yogi. Na vishajeta vayuvat, this is how one can be happy, that as they go about living, to not be affected by what you input. And he gives the example, vayuvat, like the air. Shared in a more summary English way. When there's a tornado that goes through Florida, a hurricane that goes through Mexico, does anything happen to the air? That air comes back to being exactly as it is, correct? It is not affected. So, what the air does for us is the air is pure. The air is pure. For our children, they like to eat a lot of carbs. And they don't like to go to the bathroom because it's a waste of time. When you eat a lot of carbs and you don't go to the bathroom, then what comes out of you? So now if we're driving in a car and all of a sudden that unique experience happens, even though it's not that unique with our children, who do I invite? Vayu. Open all windows irrespective of how cold it is. Correct? You see how the air, wherever it goes, it's pure. And that which is purifying. Nothing happens to that air. It comes and it goes. The air is pure, the air is purifying. And what Puja Swami Tejromayananda always shares in terms of the uniqueness of the air as compared to the sun. The sun is always working for us And we always see the sun and we offer prayers to the sun, correct? The air is always working too, but we don't see it. The air gets no appreciation. The sun does. The air doesn't. So for us, as we're working hard, when we work hard, we tend to want to be appreciated for that. But if you work hard and smart, you don't do that for appreciation. Just like the air, just like the wind. So this is the main teaching in terms of the air. Now, this is about outside air. Rishi Dattatreya also shares about inside air. I'm going to read this to you in English. Everyone who's a little bit older, you can decide if you're a little bit older or not. This message is specifically for you, okay? I have found with many of the older people that I interact with that they're moving in the opposite direction to what is taught here. I'm reading it in slow English, okay? If you're offended by it, who said it? Rishi Dattatreya, not Vivek. If you're offended by it, that actually means it applies to you more. When I read this, I'm not offended by this because I know that this doesn't apply to me. The sage should be satisfied with as much of food as is required to maintain his prana, to keep his knowledge bright and the faculties of his mind and senses intact. He should not crave for tasty food. Maybe there's some distortion. I'll say it again. He should not crave for tasty food. I have found with older people, it's like they have less to do. So that which should be functional, they make that fundamental, like eating. All thinking about shopping, preparing, cooking, eating, cleaning, and so on. But if one wants to be happy, and for those in my Thursday class, this will come later, thirst and hunger should be treated like diseases. And how do you treat a disease? With medicine. You take too much medicine, you get more sick. You take too little medicine, you get more sick. And if that sickness is serious, suppose one has some sort of cancer, high blood pressure, etc., do you ask for tasty chemotherapy? Do you ask for, I only take this type of pill for my blood pressure. I don't take this type of pill. What amazing comparisons that are shared by Rishi Dattatreya. Trying to summarize this more for us. Earth, forgive. Air, purify. What is Vivek supposed to do with this teacher? Vivek should try to practice practice purification. And that means if I'm going to help you be pure, I first have to be pure, correct? Like the wind. And now really how we can do this, because purify tends to be an esoteric word, talk about that which is important. When we talk about unimportant matters, it only creates more impurity, correct? More negativity, more gossip, and so on. But if you talk about what's important, like happiness and health and freedom and rights and scripture, then that's creating that purity. And one more benefit of this, those who talk about what's important, they're not afraid of silence. They're okay with not talking. They're okay with silence. There's almost 40 of you who have registered for the upcoming silence retreat. You do know it's 72 hours, correct? For 3 days, you cannot speak, you cannot interact. Those who have less training with talking about what's important, these silent retreats are harder for you. But those who have more training about talking about what's important, this is more natural to you. Earth, air. Next teacher, anyone want to guess? I did say I was going to read about that. The next teacher factually is space. Space is the next teacher. earth, air, space, Rishi Dattatreya says, space, like Brahman, is limitless. Where is the end of space? The earth is in space, correct? Air is in space. Brahman or infinity is the same way. And here's a very subtle thought. What is space doing? Space is not doing anything. Space is being. Earth, water, fire, air, they're doing. Like right now I'm creating air, correct? Or I'm moving air. But what is space doing? That which is infinite can't do anything. It can only be. So now, adding more details here. What is the Sanskrit word for space? Akasha. Good. Akasha is the word. It comes from avakashat. Avakashat. The root, kasha, means to be visible. Kasha means to be visible. Avakasha means that which is felt. Avakasha means that which is felt. The idea is that space is always accommodating us. Space is always avakasha. It is not just visible, it's felt. Right now, though your senses can't perceive space, space is there, correct? It is accommodating us. And zooming into this a little bit more in terms of how we can practice this. To forgive, to purify from space, what we can do is to absorb. To absorb. One who is accommodating will absorb change. One who is accommodating will absorb negativity. See, it's easy to absorb positivity, but can we absorb negativity? Generally, we call such a person large-hearted. A large-hearted person is available, accommodates others. Correct? So really how we can become one who absorbs, try not to reciprocate negativity. When you interact with someone who's cranky, what is your default? To put them in their place, correct? I'll show you cranky. I'll teach you principles. That's what we do. We have found with our younger son, Shuka, that when he's cranky, he shouts. So what does our older son do? Shouts back. But what we've realized, all Shuka needs is really some affection. He's looking for affection. And he starts to cry then. Once you give him a hug, he starts to cry because all of that miscommunication or confusion is released then. But if we start shouting back, it's being pent up. There's more suppression. So try not to reciprocate negativity. Try. Fourth teacher. Now you're going to say fire, but it's not. It's water. Earth, air, space, now water. What did we learn from earth for us? To forgive. From air to purify. Good. From space, accommodate or to absorb. To absorb. Absorb positivity and negativity. Now from water, what Bhagavan Krishna through Rishi Dattatreya teaches. Yesterday, I was watching a video about a fire in France. My kids were watching. I was sitting with them. I had nothing to do yesterday, so I watch random fire videos. And when there's a fire, what do? They put water on it. Water is that which cools that which is burning. Water is that which cools that which is burning. Now, if we think about Bharatiya culture, like Bharati, but Bharatiya culture, in Bharat, what is there a prevalence of? What was there a prevalence of? Rivers and oceans, correct? Bharat is actually, now present-day Bharat is actually a peninsula. There's water really on three sides, correct? And rivers. Wherever there's rivers, that's where civilization got established. Now, we will see, whether we like it or not, there will be a mass exodus from the Middle East because there's no water there. And you'll see a huge influx of population into the Midwest of North America because we have so much water. So whenever this body is burning, water cools it. But more philosophically, Rishi Dattatreya goes into two levels here. More philosophically, when our personalities are burning for existence, awareness, joy, then water cools us through the Ganga. Ganga is symbolic for devotion, for knowledge. That's the only way to stop burning. When you know about existence, awareness, joy. Sharing this in a more practical sense. Our verb to refresh. When you're thirsty and you drink water, don't you feel refreshed? When you're cranky and you're in satsang, how do you feel afterwards? If you're awake, you feel refreshed. If you sleep, you feel refreshed. Correct in both cases, you're refreshed. For us to refresh, and I find a great way to do this is to actively listen to people. Everybody wants attention. Everybody wants to be heard. And nobody does that. The next time you go to a Deepavali party, watch how many people are talking and how few people are listening. Just watch. And everyone's smiling and nodding. And occasionally they'll say, me too. But then if you ask them, what me too? Then they don't have backup for that. But if someone actually listens to you, feel so refreshed, like you just took a shower, correct? You feel heard. You're not dismissed. I find society is very dismissive of what we feel. Okay. Let's go into fire too. I'll do this quickly, okay? I'm now on verse 45. I chanted verse 40, now verse 45. Tejasvi tapasa deeptaha durdhara durdharo bhajanaha sarva bhakshopi yuktatma nadatte malam agnivat. Bhagavan Krishna shares, a fire is tejasvi, and it gets more tejasvi because of tapasa. Then Bhagavan Krishna shares that a fire is that which consumes food, referring to one's digestive system. Just like, now he gives a comparison. He talks about fire, but then he talks about the happy person. A happy person is one who keeps becoming better through tapa. A happy person is one who consumes all and is not affected by that. Specifically, malam agnivat, you can never make a fire impure. You can put garbage into a fire, and what will that fire do? Make that garbage pure. It will burn it down, correct? Okay. Briefly, as I'm going through this, I'm sharing exactly what Bhagavatam teaches. Then I'm trying to make this more relatable and then practical, okay? This is our 5th teacher. How many teachers are we flowing through? 24. So please be clear about this is the factual teaching. This is the relatable teaching. This is the practical teaching. Rishi Dattatreya says that fire is inviolable, which means it can never be violated. And the point being here is you can put so much garbage and that which is impure into a fire, but that fire will just burn it all down. In terms of how he relates this to our body, fire is that which has no possessions, correct? Fire has no possessions. Anything you give to it, it will burn. Bhagavan Krishna is sharing that our stomachs should be the same way, that you should only eat what can go in your stomach and nothing else. That means no fridges, no plastic containers to go. These are really, I know, they're high thoughts for us to reflect on. He shares that fire keeps replenishing itself. That a fire, the more you give to it, the more it replenishes itself. The same goes with the person who's happy. They engage in tapa. Tapa means they practice. So they keep becoming more happy. And he finally shares in a high way that fire is most captivating. Can you see space? Can you see air? What is the first element you can see? Fire. And that's why whenever there's a fire, everyone looks and nobody talks, like in a bonfire, correct? What is our new fire? Television. If you go to a restaurant and there's a TV on, instead of everyone talking to each other, what will they do? Their eyes will just drift there. See how captivating it is? Okay. For us, it is to, making this more relatable, a fire is always moving higher, correct? You don't see fires going lower. So the idea is that in our lives, we should always be moving higher too. We should always try to be a better person. And most practically, it is to accept. Our fifth verb, to accept. Now, how can one practice being more accepting? Is speak of people's strengths. When you look at a person, when you assess them, then instead of what they've not done, focus on what they have done. Instead of where they're weak, focus on their strengths. It helps one to be more accepting. Final thought, then we'll start our discussion. The one who's not ready to learn, that person cannot be taught. You can have the greatest teacher, but if they're not ready to learn, they cannot be taught. For the one who's ready to learn, they can have the worst teacher. You're thinking, yeah, Vivekji, tell us about this experience right here. You can have the worst teacher and you can learn from all. For the one who's ready to learn, we have now completed going through the 5 elements, correct? Earth, air, space, water, fire. Even these elements which we describe as inert can teach us to forgive, to purify, to absorb, to refresh, to accept. Oh.